It's not a review of the Harbor Freight Pittsburgh 1-ton gantry. It's more of modifications that I have done as a do-it-yourselfer. The first thing that I've done with the Harbor Freight 1-ton Pittsburgh gantry is I actually lowered it. And the reason why is because originally this thing is about 8 foot tall. And I have a 7-foot garage door, and I wanted to be able to just roll it out through the garage door with no problem. How I accomplished the height was I originally measured my garage door from the floor to the top, and it was 7 foot. From that, I just kind of dissected each piece to get it down to 7 foot. The first thing I did was where the casters sat. And originally, the casters were here. So I cut that at a 45-degree angle. I made this bracket, which is just 1/4 inch by 6 inch flat stock. Bent it, 45, 45. I actually tapered the bottom of the plate and then punched holes into the bottom of it. I would have to actually flip it upside down for you to see what I mean. I bent this 6 by 1/4 inch flat stock in a way that the caster would have full movement all the way around 360 degrees. It wouldn't bind up with anything. I then took another piece and made these gussets, which they're more like stiffeners. And what they do is they take the flat stock and make it more rigid, because this piece is welded on top of the tube, which then transfers up to the top. So the force of the caster is actually exerted through this gusset, or stiffener as I call it. It's fully welded. So that's all the way up, all the way down and around to the other side and up. That was the first thing I did, which that knocked off about 8 inches of what I needed. And then I simply just utilized the stiffener to run the supports from the main tube down to the top of the caster. The second thing I did was I repositioned the brackets for the, I'm actually going to call this an outrigger. That's what I'm going to call this. These brackets were originally here. I moved them up because I lowered everything down. And that's how I solved that problem. From that point, I needed to take off like another 4 or 5 inches. And instead of just cutting this off and re-drilling all these holes, what I did was I cut it off down here and then just carbon arced this plate, carbon arced it off, and then re-welded this plate onto this tube after I cut about 4 to 5 inches off the bottom of this. It was just more easier, more feasible, I guess. All the bolts are grade 8 US bolts, so it's very strong. And they were ran upward, of course. You can see the nut and thread. There was ASE washers that was used, top and bottom. Inside of this, which I'd have to disassemble it to show you what I'm talking about, there's actually sleeves that were made to fit inside this tube. So when I removed this thing, I bored this hole out to about 1 inch and then inserted a sleeve and then did a full weld around the sleeve and then installed this column and plate. That way when I went to tighten this, it wouldn't crush the tube. It actually puts all of its pressure into those sleeves that I made, and I made 8 of them. So the sleeves are 1 inch in diameter with a 1/2 inch hole drilled through the center, and then the tube was drilled out 1 inch all the way through the thickness, and then welded in and then ground flush. I angled this post and this post towards each other. This is the way I angled them, just by a few degrees. And the reason why I did that was because when I put full weight on the chain fall, it will actually cause those pillars, columns, to stretch out. Which, when this gantry is at full weight, it will actually cause the caster to go out and level, which will make this thing extremely easy to move. So that's kind of why I angled the columns inward, and that's for maximum weight. When you only have 500 pounds on it, you can move it pretty easy with no problem. This was also, this trolley, that was bought Harbor Freight. The chain fall, that was also bought Harbor Freight. And it moves pretty easy. The second thing I did was this beam. After cutting the columns down, I wanted to stretch the width of the actual I-beam. I wanted to be able to straddle my car trailer, which was at 102 inches. And this thing, when you buy it brand new, I think it's 98 inches is what the width is in between the columns. So it wouldn't straddle my actual car trailer. And how I solved that was I made new plates. And I'll show you that. This tube was actually about right here. And I wanted to make the whole gantry wider. And all I did was by 3/8 by 8 inch. That's the width of this flat stock. And then I drilled a bunch of holes in it with a mag drill. So hopefully you can see that. There's 1, 2, 3 holes down here. And then there's 3 holes up here, plus the holes that go around. The top of this only needs 4 bolts to actually support it. If I wanted to add more bolts into it, I could, but it was designed this way to stretch it out another 6 inches total. So I can take it from 102 inches to 108 inches if I needed to make this thing wide. But 102, that was kind of the general ideal. These plates, pretty much they were made 4 different plates. This is the bottom one, which went from here to the back of the tube, and it was welded onto this tube. And then the plate for the I-beam was welded, which is from here to the front of the tube. And then the top was made from this tube to the back. And then the very top plate was made from here all the way to the back. And this is just 3/8 by 8 inch wide by I think I bought a 24-foot piece just because it was easier to buy or cheaper. But that's how I did the top. And then when I made this plate, I actually drilled holes in the top of this to plug weld it along with the welds that went here. So let's see if I can get a good shot of that. These are the plug welds. The bottom plate was done the same way. If I was to separate this, you would see the plug welds underneath it. But that's just the general idea of what I did in mine. So when I stretched out the top of this and made the new plates, I had to reposition this tube. And what this tube does is it allows the gantry to telescope. Its original height, I think, was 14 feet. Now it's at about 13 feet. Modified the height, the width of the base, and the overall width of the gantry. I made little hooks that could hold my chains. So this is all my lifting chains. There's 4 different sizes there. Some of them have open-end hooks, some of them have lockable hooks, some of them are just the standard grab hook. But it's just a piece of 3/8 round stock bent. And what I did was welded the 3/8, used the torch, and then bent it to where I needed it, cut it off, welded it to the actual tube. It's actually welded on the corners, and that way it kind of protrudes out this way. So it doesn't interfere with the crank to telescope it up, which this is where I keep the handle at. Just grab it there, crank it up, so on. The chains do not interfere with it, which I'll unwind it just so you know. It doesn't interfere with it whatsoever, with the chains being stowed there. So, that's why this was at a 45-degree angle in respects to the actual tube. They all hang there. There's 4 chains there. The other thing I did was over here. It's with my straps, because I use nylon straps as well. These are 6-foot Harbor Freight straps. They're awesome for what I paid for them. But I have a spot for straps right here. 3/8, welded, bent to where I needed it, done. I will eventually get the 20-foot straps, but right now, everything that I need to do, I can use either the straps or the chains for. Comes to the chain fall. I made a hook for that as well. And what it does is I take the hook, lock it in there, tighten it up. Once it's tightened up, I take the excess, hook it around this part. I take that part, I loop it, hang it. What it does is it creates a little stowed position for the chain fall, the operating chain plus the lifting chain, and it's all in this one corner. So I got all my lifting chains here, I got my operating chain here, I got my hoist operating chain, I have my straps. It's all in this one column. So that's kind of what I did to my Harbor Freight 1-ton gantry. If I wanted to put that on that side, I just spin it. Just kidding. So that's what I've done to my 1-ton Pittsburgh Harbor Freight gantry.